My son, disregarding my claustrophobia, locked me in the basement for a day, saying, "Sit there and think about your actions." He expected obedience, but when he opened the door a day later, he saw something that made him scream in horror. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The front door slammed with enough force to rattle the kitchen windows. Keys clattered against the hardwood floor like scattered coins. Heavy footsteps stomped through the hallway while I stirred the vegetable soup, watching steam rise from the pot. Vernon burst into the kitchen, his work bag hitting the table with a thud. His face was flushed, tie loosened, shirt wrinkled from another long day at Timken Steel. The overhead light caught the sweat beading on his forehead. "Dad, I can't live like this anymore." He gestured wildly at the cramped space around us. "We need room for a normal life." I kept stirring, my wooden spoon scraping against the pot's bottom. The timer for the cornbread would sound any minute. "Evening to you too, son. Rough day?" "Don't patronize me." Vernon yanked out a chair, its legs screeching against the linoleum. "Look at this place. Silas sleeps in what used to be a storage closet. Loretta can't even have friends over because there's nowhere to sit." The cornbread timer beeped. I reached for the oven mitts, my arthritis making the movement stiff. "House served your family fine for 10 years before you moved back in." "That was temporary," Vernon's voice cracked like a teenager's. "We were supposed to find our own place months ago." Loretta appeared in the doorway, her school administrator posture perfect as always. She surveyed the scene with calculating eyes, then moved deliberately to the counter where my morning coffee mug still sat. Without a word, she picked it up and placed it in the dishwasher. "Clarence, we don't want to kick you out," she said, her tone honey-sweet with underlying steel. "But think about Silas. He needs stability, a normal family environment." I set the cornbread on the cooling rack, my grip tightening on the pan. "Normal family? Who bought this house in 1981? Who's been paying taxes, insurance, repairs for 44 years? "We're grateful," Loretta continued, now straightening the salt and pepper shakers I'd left slightly askew. "But we're all adults here. Surely we can work out arrangements that benefit everyone." Vernon stood abruptly, his chair scraping backward. "Normal? Boy, I gave you a house, and you sold it. Now you want to take this one too?" The words hung in the air like smoke from burnt toast. Vernon's face went pale, then red. He'd sold the starter home I'd helped him buy, spent the money on God knows what, and never explained why they'd move back in with me, temporarily. "That's different," Vernon muttered. "Market timing was wrong. We lost money." "Lost money?" I turned from the stove completely now, soup ladle still in my hand. "Or spent it faster than you made it." Loretta stepped between us, her movements deliberate. She opened the cabinet where I kept my coffee filters and began reorganizing them. "This isn't about the past. It's about Silas's future. He's 10 years old, Clarence. He deserves his own room, space to grow." "Space to grow?" I watched her claiming ownership of my kitchen with each small adjustment. "This house has 4 bedrooms. How much space does one boy need?" Vernon's hands clenched into fists. "Your bedroom, your office, your workshop in the basement. We get scraps." "My house," I said quietly, "that I worked 37 years at Ford to pay for." The soup started bubbling over. I turned back to the stove, lowering the heat, but the damage was done. Drops of broth hissed and popped on the burner. "See?" Loretta's voice carried that teacher tone she used on difficult parents. "We're all stressed, trying to make this work, but maybe it's time to consider other options." Vernon stepped closer, his shadow falling across my workspace. "We need to talk seriously about this, Dad, about what makes sense for everyone." I ladled soup into 3 bowls, my movements methodical, despite the tremor in my hands. 44 years of mortgage payments, 44 years of loving this place with Martha. And now they wanted to discuss what makes sense. "Dinner's ready," I announced, setting the bowls on the table with controlled precision. But Vernon wasn't finished. He grabbed my arm as I reached for the cornbread. "Tomorrow, we're going to sit down and figure this out properly." After we forced down dinner in tense silence, Vernon followed me to the living room. The argument wasn't over. Dirty dishes sat stacked in the sink, witness to our strained attempts at normalcy. Each clink of silverware had echoed like accusations. I settled into my usual armchair near the cold fireplace, the worn leather creaking under my weight. Above the mantel, Martha's wedding photo smiled down at us, her eyes bright with dreams we'd shared for this house. Vernon paced behind the couch like a caged animal, his dress shoes clicking against hardwood. "You can't live in the past forever," he said, catching me looking at Martha's picture. His voice carried less heat now, more resignation. "Past?" I touched the silver frame gently, remembering the day we'd hung it there. "Your mother and I dreamed about this house. You were born here, grew up here, took your first steps right there by that window." Loretta descended the stairs, having tucked Silas into his makeshift bedroom. She paused on the bottom step, observing our positions like a chess player studying the board. "Mom died 5 years ago." Vernon's composure cracked. "You live in memories while we live in real life." The words hit like a physical blow. I gripped the chair arms, feeling the worn fabric beneath my palms. "Real life? Boy, you don't even know what reality is." "I know I can't afford rent anywhere decent on my salary," Vernon shot back. "I know Silas asks why Grandpa's pictures are everywhere, but ours are stuck on the refrigerator. I know Loretta works double shifts because we're drowning financially." Loretta moved into the room proper, positioning herself near Silas's school backpack. "Clarence, Vernon's right about the financial pressure. We're doing our best, but this arrangement isn't sustainable." I studied her face in the lamplight. "Sustainable? I was supporting myself fine before you moved in. Mortgage paid off, utilities manageable, property taxes current." "That's not what I meant." She bent to zip Silas's backpack with unnecessary force. "I mean emotionally sustainable. For all of us." Vernon stopped pacing, turning to face me directly. "Dad, look around. Really look. This place is a shrine to someone who's gone. The throw pillows Mom embroidered are still arranged exactly like she left them. Her reading glasses are still on the side table. It's like time stopped." I glanced at the glasses, remembering how Martha would peer over them at her crossword puzzles. "Those things don't hurt anyone." "They hurt you," Loretta said softly. "And when you hurt, it affects everyone in this house." From upstairs came the sound of Silas's quiet cough, muffled by thin walls. The boy's asthma always worsened during times of stress. We all heard it, all pretended we didn't. "Tomorrow's Saturday," Loretta announced, changing subjects with practiced ease. "Silas and I are driving to my mother's. She hasn't seen him in weeks." Vernon nodded quickly. "Good idea. Dad and I need to have a real conversation without distractions." I watched this exchange, noting how smoothly they'd coordinated it. "Planning my weekend for me now?" "Planning time for honest discussion," Vernon corrected. "Maybe we can clean out some of those boxes in the basement while we talk. Organize things properly." The basement, where I'd stored Martha's belongings I couldn't bear to see daily, but couldn't bear to discard. Where Vernon's childhood toys gathered dust alongside forgotten Christmas decorations. "Organizing," I repeated. "That what we're calling it?" Loretta gathered Silas's homework papers from the coffee table, stacking them with unnecessary precision. Sometimes clearing out old things makes room for new possibilities. Outside, wind rattled the windows. March in Ohio meant unpredictable weather, cold fronts moving through without warning. The house creaked around us, settling into evening quiet. Vernon sat heavily on the couch, suddenly looking older than his 42 years. "I'm not the enemy here, Dad. I'm trying to find solutions that work for everyone." "Everyone except Martha," I said quietly. "Martha's dead." The words exploded from him. "Dead and buried and gone. We're alive, and we need to figure out how to live." Silence stretched between us like a chasm. Upstairs, Silas coughed again. Loretta's fingers tightened on the homework papers. "Tomorrow," Vernon said finally. "We'll talk tomorrow." I woke early Saturday, hoping the morning would bring clearer heads. I was wrong. Pale sunlight filtered through kitchen curtains as I measured coffee grounds, trying to establish the normal rhythms. The newspaper lay folded on the counter, headlines promising spring weather that felt impossible in March's lingering chill. Vernon appeared in the doorway before 7, already dressed in weekend clothes. His casual demeanor seemed forced, like an actor playing a role he'd rehearsed overnight. "Morning, Dad. Sleep okay?" I poured 2 cups of coffee, noting how he avoided eye contact. "Well enough. You?" "Good, good." He accepted the mug with both hands, steam rising between us. "Listen, about last night. Maybe we came on too strong. The kitchen felt different in morning light, less charged than during our dinner confrontation." Birds chirped outside the window where Martha used to watch for cardinals. I'd planned to spend the day in the garage, organizing tools, finding peace in familiar work. Apologies accepted, I said carefully. Vernon sipped his coffee, then set the mug down with deliberate precision. Dad, let's go down to the basement. Need to sort through my old stuff anyway. Maybe we can talk normally down there. Something in his tone triggered an old wariness. Too casual, too planned. But I wanted peace between us. Wanted to believe reconciliation was possible. Well, let's try, but no shouting. Footsteps on the stairs announced Loretta's arrival. She bustled into the kitchen, wearing travel clothes, her purse already slung over her shoulder. Perfect timing. Silas is getting dressed. She moved efficiently around us, packing snacks for their trip, checking items off an invisible mental list. Vernon told me about your basement plan. That's a good idea. You both need a serious conversation. Silas bounded downstairs, his overnight bag dragging behind him. Grandpa, we're going to see Grandma Eleanor. She promised to teach me card tricks. I ruffled his hair, noting how the morning light made him look younger than his 10 years. Have fun, grandson. Mind your manners. Loretta checked her watch. We should leave soon. Traffic gets heavy after 9. Vernon nodded approvingly. Take your time. Dad and I have plenty to discuss. I watched this choreographed departure, recognizing the careful timing. Loretta packed Silas's inhaler with motherly efficiency, double-checking his clothes, ensuring he had everything needed for a weekend away. You sure about this basement project? I asked Vernon. Those boxes have been down there for years. Exactly why we need to sort them. His smile seemed genuine, but something flickered in his eyes. Some things need organizing, others probably need throwing out. The front door opened and closed as Loretta loaded the car. Silas ran back inside for his forgotten game system, his excitement filling the kitchen with innocent energy. How different the house would feel without his presence. Bye, Grandpa. Bye, Dad. He hugged us both, his small arms warm and trusting. Then they were gone. Car doors slammed, engine started, tires crunched on gravel. Vernon and I stood in sudden silence, morning light streaming through windows that seemed too bright. So, Vernon said, clapping his hands together. Ready for that basement expedition? I finished my coffee, rinsed the mug, placed it in the dishwasher. Normal Saturday morning actions that felt anything but normal. Lead the way. We descended wooden steps that creaked under our weight. The basement smelled of old concrete and stored memories. A single bulb cast harsh shadows between stacked boxes, abandoned furniture, forgotten pieces of our family history. Here we are, Vernon said, his voice echoing slightly in the confined space. Tools hung neatly on pegboard walls, organized the way I'd arranged them decades ago. Martha's holiday decorations sat in labeled containers. Vernon's childhood belongings occupied one corner, untouched since his marriage. The basement felt smaller than I remembered, walls pressing closer in the artificial light. Somewhere among these boxes lay the accumulated weight of our shared past. Where do you want to start? I asked. The sound of Loretta's car faded into suburban silence above us. Vernon's posture shifted the moment those engine noises disappeared, his forced casualness evaporating like morning dew. Finally, he muttered, moving toward a cluster of unmarked boxes in the far corner. I lifted the lid of a familiar container near my workbench, finding old photo albums Martha had carefully organized years ago. School pictures of Vernon, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, when Hope still lived in this house. Look at this. I held up a photo of Vernon's 8th birthday. You wanted a bicycle so badly. Saved for 3 months to buy that red Schwinn. Vernon glanced over, his face tightening. Ancient history, Dad. Not to me. I traced the image with my fingertip. Your mother made that cake from scratch. Chocolate with vanilla frosting, shaped like a race car. Can we focus on sorting these boxes instead of walking down memory lane? Something sharp in his tone made me look up. Vernon stood protectively in front of 3 cardboard boxes, his body language screaming territorial warning. What's in those containers? I asked, genuine curiosity replacing nostalgia. Personal stuff, nothing important. His answer came too quickly, too defensive. I set down the photo album and moved closer. The boxes looked newer than the others, their tape still crisp, no dust accumulation. Personal how? Dad, please, let's stick to the old family things. Vernon, what papers are in that box? Why are you so nervous?" His face flushed red, then white. "That's none of your business. You always stick your nose where it doesn't belong." The vehemence in his voice stopped me cold. In 68 years, I'd developed decent instincts about when people were hiding something. Every alarm bell I possessed started ringing. "Son, what's got you so wound up?" Instead of answering, Vernon pushed past me toward the stairs. His movements were jerky, panicked, like a cornered animal seeking escape. "Where are you going?" "To think." He bounded up the wooden steps 2 at a time. I followed, my arthritic knees protesting the climb. "Vernon, wait. Let's talk about whatever's bothering." The basement door slammed shut above me. The sound echoed through the concrete space like a gunshot. I reached the top step, turned the knob. Nothing. Pushed harder. Still nothing. The metallic click of the lock engaging sent ice through my veins. "Vernon!" I pounded on the solid wood door. "Open this immediately!" Silence from the other side. "Vernon, unlock this right now. You know about my claustrophobia." His voice came through the door, muffled but audible. "Sit there and think about your actions. Maybe you'll finally understand what it's like to feel trapped." Footsteps moved away from the door. Then nothing. I pressed my ear against the wood, listening for any sound of movement above. The house had gone completely quiet, as if it were holding its breath. The basement suddenly felt smaller, walls pressing closer. The single bulb cast harsh shadows between the boxes, creating a maze of dark corners and hidden spaces. My breathing quickened despite my efforts to stay calm. 44 years I'd owned this house, raised a family in it, loved a woman in it, and now my own son had turned it into my prison. The irony wasn't lost on me. Vernon claimed to feel trapped living here, so he'd decided to show me what real captivity felt like. But he'd made one crucial miscalculation. I might be 68 years old, arthritic, and claustrophobic, but I was also a man who'd survived 37 years in a factory where quick thinking meant the difference between going home whole or going home in pieces. The echo of the door slam faded, leaving me alone with the hum of the furnace and my own ragged breathing. I tested the door handle again, pushing with my shoulder against wood that might as well have been concrete. Nothing. My chest tightened. The familiar sensation started in my stomach, crawling upward like ice water through my veins. Claustrophobia. The same terror that had gripped me during the factory accident in 1998, when twisted metal had pinned me in darkness for 4 hours. Stay calm, Clarence, like after the factory accident. Breathe slowly. Count. 1, 2, 3, 4. I pressed my palms against the cool basement walls, focusing on the texture of concrete rather than the weight of the house above me. The coping techniques Dr. Harrison had taught me after the accident came flooding back. 5, 6, 7, 8. My heartbeat slowed from frantic hammering to merely rapid. Sweat beaded on my forehead, despite the basement's chill. 9, 10. Better. Not good, but manageable. I shouted toward the door, knowing the futility, but needing to try. "Vernon, this isn't solving anything." My voice bounced off concrete walls, returning hollow and mocking. The house above remained silent as a tomb. I pulled out my cell phone, checking for signal bars. 0. The basement had always been a dead zone for cell service, something I'd never considered a problem until now. Methodically, I began walking the basement's perimeter, my footsteps echoing in the confined space. 30 feet by 20 feet. Concrete block walls on 3 sides, foundation stones on the 4th. No windows, no secondary exits, no convenient oversight in the construction. In the corner near my old workbench, I found a flashlight in the toolbox Martha had given me for Christmas 1987. I tested it, weak but functional. The beam revealed details the overhead bulb missed. Water stains near the foundation, a small crack in the mortar, boxes stacked with military precision. Vernon's boxes, the ones he'd been so protective of. 50 years I raised you and you lock me up like some criminal. Well, nothing to do now but wait, boy. We'll talk when you come back. But as I stood there, flashlight in hand, something nagged at me. Vernon's panic hadn't been about family tension or space issues. His reaction to those boxes had been pure terror, the fear of discovery. What was my son hiding down here? I approached the unmarked containers he'd guarded so jealously. 3 cardboard boxes, newer than everything else in the basement, sealed with packing tape that looked fresh. The first box was lighter than expected. I set it under the overhead bulb and carefully peeled back the tape. Inside, bundled stacks of cash caught the light like green confetti. My hands trembled as I lifted one bundle. $20 bills held together with rubber bands. I counted quickly. $500 in this bundle alone. And there were at least 20 bundles in this box. $10,000, maybe more. Where had Vernon gotten this kind of money? His salary at Timken Steel was decent, but not enough to accumulate this kind of cash while supporting a family and paying rent. Unless he hadn't been paying rent. Unless this money came from somewhere else entirely. I opened the second box with growing dread. Documents, expense reports with Vernon's name on them, receipts for purchases I'd never seen, hotel bills for business trips that seemed suspiciously frequent, and then I found the correspondence with Harold Finch, attorney at law. Letters discussing inheritance scenarios and asset protection strategies and timing considerations for property transfer. My son hadn't just been stealing money. He'd been planning to take everything I owned. The basement felt less like a prison now and more like a fortress. Vernon had made a critical error, locking me in the very place where he'd stored the evidence of his crimes. The flashlight beam created a circle of harsh white light as I methodically examined each document. 2.5 hours had passed since Vernon locked the door, and my initial panic had crystallized into something far more dangerous. Methodical investigation. The second box contained a treasure trove of criminal evidence. Falsified expense reports dating back 6 months, each claiming reimbursement for phantom business trips. Hotel receipts with altered dates. Meal vouchers for restaurants in cities Vernon had never visited. But the real revelation came in the third box. Corporate letterhead from Timken Steel. Blank forms Vernon had obviously stolen from the office. And most damning of all, practice sheets where he'd forged his supervisor's signature, getting the pen strokes just right before creating false authorizations. I found an old Polaroid camera in one of Martha's boxes and began photographing everything. Flash after flash illuminated the basement as I documented each piece of evidence. The irony wasn't lost on me. Vernon had locked me in the perfect place to build a case against him. $53,000 in cash, according to my count. Enough to explain why he and Loretta had been pressuring me to sign over the house. They needed me gone before anyone discovered where their sudden financial stability had come from. The correspondence with attorney Finch painted an even uglier picture. Letters discussing the best legal strategies for inheriting property from elderly relatives and accelerating asset transfer in cases of diminished capacity. They'd been planning to have me declared incompetent. I sat back on my heels, flashlight beam wavering slightly as the full scope of their betrayal sank in. This wasn't just about wanting more space or privacy. This was about money, pure and simple. Vernon had been embezzling from his employer and needed to eliminate the one person who might accidentally discover his crimes. Me. The person who'd raised him, fed him, clothed him, sacrificed to give him every advantage in life. I carefully organized the evidence into 3 piles: cash, forged documents, and correspondence. The most incriminating papers went into my jacket pockets, hidden against my body where Vernon wouldn't think to look, but I left enough evidence visible to maintain the illusion that nothing had been disturbed. Standing slowly, my knees protesting after hours of crouching on concrete, I surveyed my basement prison with new eyes. Vernon thought he'd trapped a helpless old man, but he'd actually cornered someone with 40 years of problem-solving experience and now possession of enough evidence to destroy him. The furnace kicked on, its rumble filling the silence. Soon, Vernon would return. He'd expect to find me broken, defeated, ready to negotiate on his terms. Instead, he'd find someone who finally understood exactly what kind of man his son had become. I tested the flashlight beam against the basement walls, checking for any structural weaknesses I might have missed. Not for escape now, but for strategic positioning. When Vernon returned, I wanted to control every aspect of our conversation. The single overhead bulb cast my shadow long across the concrete floor. For the first time since hearing that lock click, I smiled. Vernon had made one crucial mistake. He'd given me time to think, time to plan, and most importantly, time to discover the truth about his criminal activities. Now it was my turn to spring a trap. The evidence secured in my jacket pockets felt like armor against my ribs. Now came the practical problem of getting out of this concrete box to use what I'd discovered. I methodically examined the basement ceiling, flashlight beam revealing details I'd never noticed in 44 years of ownership. Wooden joists, copper pipes, electrical conduits running toward the main floor, and there, behind a stack of holiday decoration boxes, a small rectangular opening I'd forgotten existed. The ventilation window, 18 inches wide, 12 inches tall, covered by a rusty metal grate with 4 screws holding it in place. I moved the boxes carefully, stacking them against the wall to create access steps. Each container held memories, Christmas ornaments Martha had collected, Halloween decorations from when Vernon was young, Easter baskets that had delighted a grandson who still trusted his grandfather. The screwdriver from my toolbox fit the great screws perfectly. Rust had frozen them solid, but patient pressure and mechanical leverage eventually won. I used to climb factory structures once. Haven't forgotten the principles yet. The first screw surrendered with a screech of protest. The second came easier. By the third, my arthritic fingers cramped around the tool handle, but determination overrode discomfort. The grate fell into my hands with surprising weight. Cold March air rushed through the opening, carrying scents of earth and early spring that promised freedom. Testing the window opening against my shoulders revealed the tight squeeze ahead. Vernon had always been broader than me, but factory work had kept me lean even into retirement. The window frame would scrape, but it was possible. I climbed the box tower I'd constructed, flashlight clenched between my teeth. The concrete sill was rough against my palms as I pulled myself up, ribs compressing painfully against the window frame. My legs kicked frantically for purchase against the basement wall. For a moment, claustrophobia threatened again, trapped halfway through, unable to move forward or back. But then my shoulders cleared the opening, and I tumbled into Martha's old flower garden. Cold ground met my face with the impact of salvation. I lay there breathing hard, surrounded by the skeletal remains of her rose bushes. Above, stars scattered across March sky like scattered promises. Now you'll see, boy, what it means to play games with your father. I pulled myself upright, brushing dirt from my jacket, while keeping the evidence documents secure. The house loomed dark and silent above me, no lights indicating Vernon's return. My garage key still worked. Inside, I found Martha's old gardening journal and carefully inserted the most incriminating photographs between pages about fertilizer schedules and pruning techniques. If something happened to me, the evidence would survive. But I had no intention of letting Vernon win through my misfortune. The Ramsey house next door glowed with warm lamplight. Esther and Virgil had been good neighbors for 20 years, the kind of people who brought casseroles during illness and borrowed sugar during emergencies. Tonight, I needed their telephone. I walked across the yard separating our properties, rehearsing my story. An old man locked out of his house, son gone somewhere with the car, just needing to call for help. Simple, believable, designed to trigger neighborly sympathy without revealing the darker truth. The porch light came on before I reached their door. Esther's silhouette appeared behind lace curtains. Then the door opened to reveal her concerned face. "Clarence, what's wrong, dear?" "Sorry to bother you so late, Esther." I arranged my features into the expression of a mildly embarrassed elderly man. "Lost my keys somewhere, and Vernon went out with Loretta. Locked myself right out of my own house." Esther clucked sympathetically, opening the door wider. "Oh, you poor thing. Come in, come in. Virgil's in his chair watching the late news. Would you like some coffee while you figure out what to do?" Perfect. Exactly the response I'd hoped for. "That's very kind. Could I possibly use your telephone? Need to call my friend Amos. He's got a spare key." "Of course. Phone's right there in the kitchen." I settled into their familiar kitchen, accepting a steaming mug while Esther bustled around, clearly pleased to help a neighbor in distress. Her kindness made the deception sting slightly, but Vernon's crimes had created this necessity. Amos answered on the second ring, his voice alert despite the late hour. "Pollard here." "Amos, it's Clarence Dutton. I need your help with something serious." A pause. "What kind of serious, Clarence?" "The kind that involves theft, unlawful imprisonment, and enough evidence to put someone away for years." Another pause, longer this time. "Where are you calling from?" "Neighbor's house. Can't talk freely right now." "Understood. Give me the basics. I explained carefully, keeping my voice low while Esther puttered in the living room. Vernon's embezzlement, the locked basement, the discovered evidence, my escape, and current situation. Clarence, this is serious. Theft from employer, unlawful imprisonment of family member. What exactly are you planning? I want him to expose himself completely. Will you help? Professional curiosity alone makes this worth pursuing. Plus, you're my friend. What do you need? Tomorrow morning, he'll return eventually, find me unconscious in the basement. When he starts talking about what he did, you need to be listening. Amos understood immediately. Recording equipment, witness positioning, coordinated entry after confession begins. Standard operation for this type of situation. Exactly. I'll coordinate with my team tonight. You'll have backup tomorrow, Clarence. Just remember, as dangerous as this son of yours sounds, we need his confession on record for prosecution. Don't worry about that part. Guilt and panic will make him talk. After hanging up, I thanked Esther profusely for her kindness, spinning a story about Amos coming by in the morning with a locksmith. She offered to let me sleep on their couch, but I declined, claiming Vernon might return and worry about his missing father. The return journey through my backyard felt different now. No longer an escape route, but preparation for the final act. I squeezed back through the ventilation window, with less difficulty than the initial exit, my body having learned the necessary contortions. In the basement, I carefully repositioned the holiday boxes to conceal my escape route. The evidence remained hidden. The grate stayed loosely in place, but removable from inside. Everything appeared exactly as Vernon had left it, except for the old man he'd assumed would remain trapped and helpless. I settled into a corner near the boxes containing his criminal evidence, testing positions that would look convincingly unconscious while allowing quick movement when needed. The concrete floor was cold and unforgiving, but I'd endured worse during my factory years. Tomorrow morning, Vernon would return to find his father, apparently collapsed from stress and confinement. What he wouldn't expect was a man who'd spent the night preparing the most comprehensive trap of his life. The furnace cycled on, its rumble filling the silence. Soon, very soon, my son would learn what justice felt like when delivered by someone who'd raised him, loved him, and been betrayed by him. I closed my eyes and waited for dawn. Sunday morning arrived gray and cold, matching my mood perfectly. At 8 o'clock sharp, I heard Amos's unmarked police car pull into my driveway. Time for the final act to begin. I positioned myself near the window, calling up softly. Around back, through the garden. Amos appeared at the ventilation opening minutes later, his weathered face grim with professional determination. "Morning, Clarence. Ready to catch a criminal?" "More than ready." I climbed through the window one final time, brushing dirt from my clothes. "How many officers did you bring?" "3 good ones. Rodriguez positions at the front entrance, Chen covers the back door, Williams watches the side windows. All experienced in domestic situation arrests." We walked toward his car, where additional equipment waited in the trunk. Recording devices, communication radios, enough technology to document every word Vernon would speak. "Remember the timeline," Amos said, handing me a small radio transmitter. "He called yesterday saying he'd return around 10:30 this morning. That gives us 2 hours to prepare everything." I tested the radio, hearing Chen's voice crackle through clearly. "Signal comes when he starts confessing, not before. We need him to incriminate himself completely." "Understood. And Clarence, don't try to be a hero down there. Your job is triggering his guilt, not confronting a desperate criminal." We returned to the basement, where Amos examined the crime scene with professional thoroughness. Vernon's evidence boxes, my improvised escape route, the positioning for maximum psychological impact. "He'll panic when he finds you unconscious," Amos predicted. "Guilt will drive him to explain what happened, probably trying to justify his actions." "That's when the radio signal goes out," I confirmed. Amos nodded approvingly. "Don't worry, he'll talk. His conscience won't let him rest with what he's done." The next hour passed in careful preparation. Officers took their positions around the house, communication equipment was tested repeatedly, and I practiced my unconscious performance until it looked convincing. At 10 o'clock, I returned to the basement for the final time, arranging myself near Vernon's evidence boxes in a position suggesting collapse from exhaustion and stress. The radio transmitter nestled securely in my jacket pocket, hidden but accessible. Through the ventilation window, I could hear muffled radio chatter as the officers confirmed their positions. Rodriguez at the front, Chen covering rear access, William's monitoring side approaches, all waiting for my signal. At 10:25, everything went silent. I lay motionless on the concrete floor, controlling my breathing, listening for the sound of Vernon's return. The evidence of his crimes surrounded me in cardboard boxes, photographed and documented, ready to destroy his freedom just as he'd tried to destroy mine. My watch showed 10:28 when I heard the car engine. Vernon was home. Footsteps crossed the front porch, keys jingled, the front door opened and closed. Movement upstairs, then silence as he presumably noticed the house's emptiness. His voice called down tentatively. "Dad, you still down there?" I remained perfectly still, eyes closed, breathing shallow. Footsteps on the basement stairs, slow, uncertain, growing closer. "Dad?" The footsteps stopped. I could feel Vernon's presence nearby, his shock at finding his father apparently unconscious on the basement floor. "Oh no! Oh no! What did I do?" His voice cracked with genuine panic and guilt. Perfect. I waited, maintaining my performance as Vernon's conscience began the confession that would end his criminal career forever. The trap was sprung. Now came justice. Car tires crunched on gravel at exactly 10:35. Vernon was home. I controlled my breathing, lying motionless on the basement floor with my eyes closed. The radio transmitter pressed against my ribs, ready to signal Amos when Vernon's guilt overwhelmed his caution. Footsteps crossed the front porch. Keys jingled. The front door opened and closed with familiar sounds I'd heard thousands of times over the years. "Dad!" Vernon's voice called from upstairs, cautious and testing. I remained perfectly still, controlling every muscle to maintain my unconscious performance. Through the floorboards above, I heard him moving through the house, checking rooms, confirming we were alone. "Dad, you still down there?" His footsteps approached the basement door. The lock clicked open. Wooden steps creaked under his weight as he descended slowly, uncertainty evident in every sound. "Dad?" Vernon's sharp intake of breath told me he'd spotted my motionless form on the concrete floor. His footsteps quickened, then stopped beside me. "Oh no! Oh no! What did I do?" Perfect. The guilt was already consuming him. I felt his hands checking my pulse, his fingers trembling against my wrist. "Dad, wake up. Please wake up." His voice cracked with genuine panic. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, when fear overwhelmed his rational mind and opened the floodgates of confession. "This is all my fault." Vernon's words tumbled out in a frantic rush. "I didn't want this to happen. I just needed time to figure everything out." He shook my shoulders gently, trying to revive me. "Dad, I'm sorry. I know about your claustrophobia, but I was desperate. The money... I stole that money from work." My heart rate increased, but I maintained perfect stillness. The confession was beginning. $53,000 over 6 months. Vernon's voice rose with hysteria. Fake expense reports, forged signatures, everything. I hid it all down here because I knew you never came through my boxes. He was giving me everything I needed, every detail, every crime. I consulted that lawyer about getting you declared incompetent. We needed this house because we spent everything. Loretta doesn't even know how bad it is. Vernon stood abruptly, pacing around my motionless form. "I locked you down here because you were getting too close to discovering everything. But I never meant for you to get hurt." Time for the signal. I pressed the radio transmitter button 3 times. Short bursts that would alert Amos to move in for the arrest. "Please wake up, Dad. I'll confess everything. I'll make it right." Footsteps thundered down the basement stairs. Not Vernon's hesitant steps, but the confident stride of law enforcement. "Vernon Dutton, you're under arrest for embezzlement and unlawful imprisonment." Vernon spun around, his face going white with shock. "What? How did you—" Amos appeared in my field of vision, badge visible, handcuffs ready. Behind him, officers Rodriguez and Chen took positions to prevent any escape attempt. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." I opened my eyes slowly, as if regaining consciousness. Vernon stared down at me with a mixture of relief and dawning horror. "Dad, you were awake?" I sat up carefully, brushing dust from my jacket. "I heard every word, son." The color drained completely from Vernon's face as understanding hit him. "You set this up. The whole thing." I gave you every opportunity to tell the truth, I replied quietly. You chose lies and theft instead. Amos secured the handcuffs around Vernon's wrists with practiced efficiency. Mr. Dutton, we'll need you to come to the station for a full statement. Vernon looked at me with something approaching respect mixed with his devastation. You really did it. You actually caught me. Justice caught you, I corrected. I just made sure it had the chance. As they led him toward the stairs, Vernon turned back one final time. Dad, I'm sorry. For everything. The police station buzzed with Sunday afternoon activity as I provided my formal statement. Detective Williams typed steadily while I recounted every detail: the basement imprisonment, the discovered evidence, Vernon's recorded confession. $53,000 in documented theft. Prosecutor Janet Mills reviewed the evidence spread across her desk. Plus, unlawful imprisonment, falsification of corporate documents, forgery. Your son's looking at serious time, Mr. Dutton. The photographs I'd taken in the basement lay arranged in neat rows, each one damning Vernon further. His handwritten practice sheets for forging signatures were particularly devastating. However, Mills continued, given his cooperation and full confession, we're prepared to offer a plea agreement, 5 years probation, full restitution, mandatory counseling, and supervised community service. Justice without destroying what remained of my family. That seems fair. By late afternoon, Vernon had signed the plea agreement. Timken Steele terminated his employment immediately and filed additional civil suits for damages. The house remained mine, exactly as it should be. Loretta's car screeched into the driveway at 6:30, returning from her mother's with Silas. I watched from the living room window as she saw the police cars, the neighbors gathering, the unmistakable signs of family catastrophe. She burst through the front door like a hurricane. What happened? Where's Vernon? Arrested for embezzlement and imprisoning me in the basement, I said simply. Her face cycled through disbelief, anger, and calculation before settling on fury. You destroyed our family because of your stubborn pride. I didn't destroy anything, Loretta. I just let the truth come out. Silas appeared behind her, his young face confused and frightened. Grandpa, where's Dad? Your father made some bad choices at work, grandson. He's going to fix them, but it'll take time. Loretta's voice turned shrill. Bad choices? He was providing for us, trying to build a future while you hoarded this house like some ancient dragon. By stealing $53,000 and locking his father in a basement? I kept my voice calm for Silas's sake. That's not providing, that's criminal. She began packing immediately, throwing clothes and belongings into suitcases with aggressive efficiency. We're leaving. Silas, get your things. Can I still visit Grandpa? Silas asked quietly. Loretta hesitated, her anger warring with practicality. Single mother, reduced income, need for child care support? We'll see. By Monday morning, they were gone. Vernon was released on supervised probation to a court-approved apartment across town. The house fell silent for the first time in months. I walked through rooms that felt larger without the weight of their resentment and desperation. Martha's photo smiled from the mantel, and for the first time since her death, I felt she would approve of what I'd done. Justice had been served, not revenge, but consequences. Vernon would work to repay what he'd stolen, attend counseling to address his problems, and hopefully learn from his mistakes. The basement door stood open, no longer a symbol of imprisonment, but simply storage space again. I'd make some changes down there, better lighting, proper ventilation, maybe a workshop where Silas could learn to use tools properly, if Loretta allowed visits, that is. Time would tell whether anger or practicality would win that battle. For now, the house was mine again, truly, completely mine, and that felt exactly right. April sunshine streamed through the new basement window I'd had installed, replacing the narrow ventilation opening that had once served as my escape route. The concrete floor was covered with interlocking foam tiles, and proper LED lighting had replaced the single harsh bulb. My workshop was taking shape nicely. Pegboard walls held tools organized the way I'd learned at the Ford plant, each implement in its designated place. A sturdy workbench dominated the center, surrounded by storage cabinets I'd built myself over the past month. Grandpa, can I help with the birdhouse? Silas asked from the bottom of the new stairs. I looked up from sanding the cedar boards, surprised by his quiet appearance. When did you get here? Mom dropped me off. She's at the grocery store. He touched the workbench reverently. This is so much better than before. The custody arrangement had worked out better than expected. Loretta's apartment was cramped and expensive, her single income stretched thin without Vernon's salary. Weekend visits with me provided childcare relief she desperately needed, even if pride prevented her from admitting it. "Hand me that smaller sandpaper," I instructed, watching him carefully select the right grit. "We'll smooth these edges so no bird gets splinters." Silas worked quietly beside me, his small hands steady despite his excitement. "Dad called yesterday. He's working at the warehouse now. Vernon's probation included mandatory employment. The warehouse job paid minimum wage, barely covering his supervised apartment and restitution payments. A humbling fall from management, but honest work." "How's he doing?" I asked carefully. "Sad mostly. He says he's sorry for what he did to you. Really sorry." I handed Silas a pencil and ruler. "Mark the holes for the entrance. 2 inches from the bottom, centered exactly." Teaching moments came naturally now. Precision, patience, following instructions, taking pride in craftsmanship. Values I'd hoped to pass on years ago, before Vernon had chosen shortcuts and deception. "Grandpa, Mom says we might move to a cheaper apartment. One closer to here. Practical considerations driving decisions." Good. Loretta was learning to prioritize necessity over pride. We worked in comfortable silence, grandfather and grandson building something useful together. The basement that had once been my prison had become our creative space, filled with light and purpose. Through the new window, I could see Martha's garden beginning to bloom. I'd planted early vegetables this spring, tomatoes, peppers, herbs. Silas could help tend during his visits. The rose bushes were showing new growth, surviving winter, and ready for another season. "Will you teach me how to use the saw next time?" Silas asked as we assembled the birdhouse pieces. "When you're ready, tools require respect and patience." "Like Dad didn't have?" Smart boy. "Your father forgot those lessons for a while. Maybe he'll remember them now." Silas nodded seriously, understanding more than his 10 years should require. "Mom says the judge might let him visit us here someday, if he's good. We'll see. Family healing would take years, if it happened at all, but children adapt, and Silas was learning valuable lessons about consequences and redemption. The birdhouse came together perfectly. Joints tight, roof angled for proper drainage. I drilled pilot holes while Silas selected screws, both of us absorbed in the satisfaction of creating something functional and beautiful. "Where should we hang it?" he asked. "Near the kitchen window? Your grandmother loved watching birds while she cooked." Martha would have approved of this scene, her grandson learning skills in the basement that had nearly become my tomb. Life growing from the ashes of family destruction, purpose emerging from chaos. The house was ours again, truly ours, filled with the sounds of honest work and quiet conversation. Spring was beginning, and with it, the possibility of something better than what we'd lost. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.